like I think the Democrats would do, just pass all that money, increase the statewide property tax dramatically, and then leave it to localities to reduce the tax.
Sure.
I can tell you where our tax burden will be at the end of the day, and people will not be able to afford to live in this state.
Hi, this is Michael Graham. Welcome to the Airport Diner, the legendary home of our diner table economics conversations. We talk to the people who want to govern New Hampshire about the most important economic issues to you, courtesy of our friends at the Airport Diner and our sponsors at Americans for Prosperity of New Hampshire. Welcome to Diner Table Economics from New Hampshire Journal. I am Michael Graham. We are delighted to be with you at the legendary Airport Diner, courtesy of our friends at Americans for Prosperity New Hampshire. Today we're talking to gubernatorial candidate Kelly Ayotte. Kelly, welcome to Diner Table Economics.
Thank you, Michael. It is great to be here.
So I have news for you. We are going to have a breakthrough revelation that Ms. Ayotte is not expecting. Her affection for a hideous dessert product. But we're going to save that for later. Just hang on for that.
So
hideous.
So not hideous. I can't wait to talk about it with your listeners.
But so the premise is people got to pay their bills all over New Hampshire. People are sitting down at their kitchen table. They're figuring out their bills, whatever. So how would you describe the current state of the New Hampshire economy?
First of all, I think New Hampshire's in a very strong position, especially relative to the rest of the New England, and I would say very strong relative to the country. Mm-hmm. But New Hampshire's also facing the same challenges that everyone's facing in the nation right now. Higher costs due to inflation. Mm-hmm. That hits everyone. Today, this meal's going to cost more than it normally would. Unfortunately, the grocery store, everything costs more. Also, it costs more to build things and to do things. And then you combine that with rising interest rates, and you can imagine just the challenge when we think about the housing issue or building in New Hampshire or investment, that hits us as well. But I will tell you, Michael, I believe that being in New Hampshire and the New Hampshire advantage is so important, and that we're in a very strong position. We're growing. We see the investment that's being made here. We look at the mistakes our neighbors have made, like
for example,
Massachusetts.
What's a mistake you think that they're making?
I'll give you a prime example: the 4% tax on revenue over $1 million that Massachusetts passed and put in place. And what does that do? I mean, by the way, a small business, how long does it take to get to $1 million of revenue? And so those people are leaving that state with their feet. And they're doing it because they understand the tax burden. If you combine that with an income tax, the sales tax, I laugh every time they have this sales tax holiday. It's like a joke. It's like, okay, well, that's why your people shop in New Hampshire every day, because we're always sales tax free. So we can go on and on issues that I think New Hampshire's just in a much stronger position.
So what are the issues, though, that people bring up to you when you're out campaigning? When you go through a diner like this and you talk to people, what do they bring up when it comes to the economy?
So when it comes to the economy, I would say the issue that I'm hearing about most is housing. In terms of availability, we just have a lack of supply in this state. I mean, this is a national phenomenon, but it's certainly hit New Hampshire acutely. And then you combine that with almost the perfect storm, a lack of supply, higher interest rates, and higher costs with inflation to build things. So people are concerned about that, and certainly as someone running for governor, I want to make it easier to build in New Hampshire. We need to be a very business-friendly state, because for workforce, all the employers that I meet, they're saying to me, we need more workforce, and they need houses to live in. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
So what can the governor do? One of the things the Governor Sununu tried is kind of a carrot and stick approach, where he made money available to communities if they would allow building. So I guess it was more a carrot and carrot. The stick was very minimal. Would you be willing to use the stick? Like, would you be willing to say leverage a resource to the state and say, if you do X, you'll get Y, but if you won't do X, we're going to give Y to somebody else?
Well, I mean, listen, I think that we've always had this sort of, the local decision making is really important. Manchester's going to decide what they want to build, whether, Merrimack, I was there this morning at the Rotary. But that said, the state does play a role. So here's where I think the state can be in a better position. Number one, approvals. So yes, a lot of approvals happen at the local level through planning and zoning boards. But in order to build and develop anything in the state, you're going to have to get probably at a minimum the approvals of DOT, DES, Fish and Game, and often others, right?
Right.
And so as I'm traveling the state, I'm hearing that process isn't working as well as it should.
Okay.
Things get hung up there.
Sure.
You know, what happens is if you're developing a big project, think about what the context we've been in.
Exactly.
With inflation and interest rates. So if it takes me a year to get state approvals, wow.
Exactly.
The cost of the project just went up dramatically. For all I know in that period, the interest rate of how I can borrow money went up too. So this really matters. So I would like to overhaul the state process and use from the private practice the lean manufacturing process, where we look at from the beginning to the end with all agencies communicating across the board, how long does it really take? I'd like to get it down to 60 days and make sure it's transparent, make sure that you get an answer so you know if there's a problem with your project, how do I fix it, and get it done in a timely fashion. And I can tell you, like, Michael, I was surprised, like, as I was campaigning, driveway permits.
Right.
I hear a lot about them. Yeah. I mean, I really do. Like, as someone running for governor. So, like, yeah. So that's just one example of where the state can have, I think, be better. And so the state modeling good behavior on that. Hopefully, we can say to the state, to the local, hey, we're modeling good behavior. We hope you do too. We need you to. In terms of the governor Invest New Hampshire, the incentive piece, you're right. It was more. He used the federal funds, a lot of which came from the COVID money, to incentivize communities to build, to partner with the private sector, with municipalities. And so, sure, if we can partner, I want to do it. I think we're not going to have this surplus of federal funds that we had before, but infrastructure issues. I don't look at this as like a carrot or a stick to the community, but it is a carrot in the sense that if adding the housing is going to add infrastructure to your community, you need a road, you need sewer, you need groundwater. I mean, that is something the state can partner on, and it is a good use of resources because it's benefiting a larger group of people. So to have the housing for workforce, for the communities, and so I know we've got limited resources on this, so we should be working together when it comes to the biggest economic challenge we're facing, outside of obviously tax and regulatory.
So let's say that you're ready to do that and you become governor, but we're in a recession, or we hit a recession. Do you think New Hampshire's ready for a recession? And if you were a recession governor, what would be kind of like the top 2 or 3 things in your mind?
I think New Hampshire is, recessions are never easy for any state, but we're in a very strong economic position in New Hampshire. Certainly, I appreciate the leadership of Governor Sununu over the last 8 years, and over the last several years, the Republican legislature, of keeping the state in a stronger fiscal position. So because of that, the last biennium, they've put, over $200 million in the rainy day fund or the education trust fund. So thinking about being fiscally responsible. So I would say that if we're in a recession, it's the most important time to have a conservative in that corner office, because the first instinct of the Democrats, and especially the 2 women that are running for office this time, will be, let's increase revenue. And when they say that, that means hold on to your wallet, because the taxpayers are going to pay a lot more. So I would say, if you look at the last biennial budget, it was an 11% increase between the from the biennium before. So can we find ways to do things better? We're going to have to. If we're in a recession, we're going to have to be better at what we do. We're going to have to live within our means. That's what families are going to do. The last thing we should be doing in a recession in particular is passing on costs to families that already can't afford it.
And that's the premise of dining table economics. So those families are dealing with stuff like that. So I want to ask, one of the things that people who are supporting your primary opponent say is, he worked in state government, he was the finance chair, he had to do budgets. When you're in the Senate, it's not, Senate to executive is not a necessarily natural fit. So for people who are concerned about your skills as an executive, to be the person in the governor's office who handles these issues, what would you say?
Well, I have been an executive. First of all, I was Attorney General.
And that budget, I mean, come on. I'll put it this way, if it was a big budget, they wouldn't let Formella handle it. I'm kidding.
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, you say I'm not an executive. I had to run, obviously be the chief legal officer, the chief law enforcement officer of the state. So beyond the budget piece, like literally leading very important parts of our state, including on public safety. And it's not an accident, by the way, that the head of the finance committee, Ken Weiler,
Right.
He's endorsed me in this campaign,
Okay.
like in the House. And I'll tell you, because I go back that far with
Right.
Ken, of having appeared before him on that committee when I was Attorney
Right.
General on my budget. So I do understand the state process. It's important. And by the way, I spent the last 6-7 years in the private sector. And in the private sector, you have to understand, finance, you have to
Right.
understand a balance sheet, income statements, and I do understand that.
Do you think that New Hampshire, as business friendly as it is for New England, is it business friendly enough to compete with the rest of the country? And one of the issues that comes up obviously is energy costs. Because I'm from South Carolina, and you can run a whole factory off of a battery until you have to turn the air conditioning on.
Yeah.
And so it's just such a different scale. What do you think New Hampshire should be thinking about as it tries to remain competitive? Not just, it's easy to compete with Vermont and Massachusetts, but how do you compete with, Arizona and Texas? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think, just to say, kind of put in perspective where we are right now, we have the lowest poverty rate in the nation. It's the
Right.
#1 state for child well-being. I think it's like the 1 or 2 state on taxpayer return, the #1 state on freedom. We can go on and on.
Right.
So I would argue that we are competing nationally against some of these other states. But you're right. How do we be in a better position?
Right.
Beyond just cleaning the clocks of our neighbors in New England, which we are. And why are we doing that? Because
Right.
we have common sense, kind of conservative
Right.
policy, the New Hampshire advantage. We protect it. But energy is the key. Our energy prices are some of the highest among the nation. And we just don't have enough energy, Michael. I mean, this is another supply and demand problem we have here, just like housing. So more energy of all forms. And so as governor, I want to certainly champion how do we get more
Right.
energy. Second, not adding regulatory costs on, to ratepayers that
Right.
some of these other liberal states have done. I mean, I look at the energy policies that have been proposed by
Right.
Cindy Warmington and Joyce Craig, and I say to you, wow, you think you're paying a lot right now to heat your home or keep the air conditioning on in
Right.
the summer in these hot days? Wait till they get into office, because of course they propose all these great plans. Oh, we're going to protect the environment and all these things, and yet no price tag to it. In fact, Cindy's, it looks like she wants to eliminate combustion engines. Good luck with that, with this net zero thing. So I can say just sort of common sense on the
Right.
regulatory front. Governor Sununu
Sure.
has done that, and I think continuing that path. Finally, how do we be open to new technologies? Small modular nuclear. Why? Because it's not an immediate play,
Right.
but if we could bring that type of technology to New Hampshire or be an early adopter,
Right.
it would be transformative. Not only could people produce their own energy, and we could put one up in Berlin, we could put one up in North Conway,
Right.
different parts.
Sure.
The technology, less nuclear material, it's really developing. And could you imagine New Hampshire throughout the state producing its own energy? So I think thinking ahead and, making sure we're positioned from a regulatory standpoint,
Sure.
right? Because you can do things that can make it very difficult for you to adopt new technologies. We don't want to do that in New Hampshire.
So you mentioned new technology that needs new workers with new skills.
Yeah.
On education, New Hampshire always ranks really high. But still, on the technical skills, so we have a lot of white-collar workers around here.
Career.
What about the blue-collar workers? Or I even think that's the wrong term anymore, because like if you go up to where they do logging in the northern part of the state, there's a laptop screen next to the buzzsaw thingy, which is why that's the technical term, the buzzsaw
Oh,
thingy.
and I was, by the way, I was
amazing.
just up at a logging company in northern
Yeah.
New Hampshire, and also they're putting whole new technology in there with biomass to run their whole thing. It's terrific.
So how does the state make sure that whether it's the new tech is robotics or the new
Yeah.
tech is nuclear, whatever, that they have the workers, and what's the proper role for the state when it comes to our education system?
So, Michael, I do think that that's an area where the state can be certainly better. And as I'm traveling the state, we have a real gap in the trades still.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the basic, plumbers, electricians,
Welders.
welders, HVAC. The other area, with automotive, it's become so much more advanced. It's advanced automotive.
Right, exactly.
Same thing with marine. I was up with the marine guys, and they're like, listen, this is so important to us because the skill sets we need to fix boats, because the technology's gotten different. The screens are in the boats now. It's sophisticated.
Right.
And the way we do that is it's our community college system, leveraging that community college system and making sure that they're updated toward the needs of the employers. And here's the good news. The private sector is so anxious to partner on this.
Right.
They have the need, and so we can create those public-private partnerships at our community colleges. And I'll give you an example. So I've had the chance to chair the board for BAE Systems, our largest manufacturing employer.
Right.
And BAE formed a partnership with the National Community College on microelectronics. And it's a 9-month certificate program.
Right.
BAE gave them the equipment, they put the program together, public-private partnership.
Right.
Everyone who comes out of that program is guaranteed an interview with BAE, but it doesn't just benefit BAE, other employers
Sure.
who need this training, people come out there, they
Right.
get a good paying job. We can replicate things like that throughout the state. It's going to take us working with the private sector, being innovative, and really maximizing the state piece of it with the private piece.
Right.
Why not? And then getting into our high schools. I could spend a whole lot of time on this. But you know, our high school guidance, we need them to tell kids about these
Right.
opportunities. It can't just be like there's one path. The 4-year degree is great. I have
Sure.
one, but it's not everyone's path.
Exactly.
And I don't know if you've paid an electrician lately. Like, there's some good money to
You know,
be made.
it drove
in
me
these
crazy.
jobs.
My kids get pushed. Everyone's got to go to college.
Yeah.
I have one kid who did not belong in college, and he's doing great, and
I'm
that's the
sure
right
he is.
thing to do. But the other concern for the economy is paying for K through 12 education. And as you know, we've got
Right.
the lawsuits that are going through. There recently been some filings. It's going to go to the state Supreme Court. Big picture, what do you think is the right way for the state to play a role in education funding? And should it be in the business of equalizing the so-called donor towns and the recipient towns, or should it be, look, here's everybody gets a check, $5,000 a kid, good luck working that
And
out?
I've always thought that, you know, the targeted approach is smart. I know that many have worked in the legislature to try to put together a formula that makes
Right.
the most to serve the needs of the community. And, you know, I look at this lawsuit, and obviously, to me, the lawsuit's wrong. I mean, the judge pulls a number out of the air, and judges should not be
Wait,
deciding.
you don't think just one guy behind the bench should invent the
Yeah,
number
well-
$7,300 and just send it out to everyone? What, are you kidding
I
me?
mean, exactly.
What a great way to
Michael.
run things.
Exactly, and you know, the thing is, the legislature should be deciding this. I mean,
Right.
the people's elected representatives. So I hope this is going up to our state Supreme Court, and let's hope that thing gets repealed or overturned. Because here's where we are. If you look at what we're spending on education, you know, roughly now we're at what I think it's $22,000 per pupil if you combine the state and the local funding, and that is on the top 10 spending in education
Right.
in the nation. So the idea, you know, I look at the Democrats who are running here, and they've all decried, you know, wow, that opinion was right, and
Right.
I'm like, how are they going to fund that? That
Right.
doesn't make sense to me. And you know, and the people that sell to me and say well, let's face it, when the judge looked at that, he was only looking at the
Right.
state piece. He was not looking at the local funding
Right.
piece. And when people say, oh, well, you know, the state should pick this all up. And if you think, by the way, that the localities are going to reduce your taxes by the same amount, we know what happened. I mean, every model this has ever happened in, like
Right.
Connecticut, when they introduced an income tax,
Sure.
like they sold it to try to reduce local property taxes. It never happened. So to me, I don't think that the right way is the idea that somehow, you know, we're going to increase the funding at the state level, but it's somehow going to reduce the local, because that never comes to truth. If you want to protect taxpayers, then you have to manage the money responsibly.
But if this dump, let's say that the court case goes the wrong way, you suddenly have hundreds of millions of new dollars that have to go out of state government. What do you do?
Well, we'll have to look at the issue when we get there, but I'm not going to be passing, you know, increases to
Right.
local taxpayers. I can tell you the number one priority to me, yes, our kids need a great education. It's important. But protecting taxpayers, like if you want to talk about driving people out of their homes, if you suddenly, like I think the Democrats would do, just pass all that money, increase the statewide
Right.
property tax dramatically, and then leave it to localities to reduce the tax,
Sure.
I can tell you where our tax burden will be at the end of the day, and people will not be able to afford to live in this state.
So let's get to the true. Are you rolling? Get her on this. So let's get to the real scandal here behind the Kelly Ayotte
Okay.
candidacy.
There's-
What is this stuff you eat? Grape nut what?
I love grape nut custard.
Grape
And
nut custard.
Grape nut custard because my grandmother used to make this, and it's just like comfort food for me. The custard with the grape nuts.
Oh,
in
no,
it.
no, I've seen it.
And you need a healthy dose of whipped cream on it. Trust me. Yum.
Grape nut custard with whipped
With
cream.
whipped cream.
Okay, so I'm from
Yeah.
where they have real food down south.
What?
And I discovered grape nut custard by accident one time
So
when I
delicious.
came to New England.
Yeah.
And I saw, I'm like, this can't be what I think. It must be some funny name for
It's
something
like
good.
comfort food. It's awesome.
It's grape nut cereal.
Love
And
it.
it's disgusting.
Come on.
It's like baby
It
food.
reminds me of my grandmother.
Do you eat cream of wheat? It's like a cream of wheat thing.
I
It's-
do. Yeah,
Ah,
you
so
know what?
good. That's not
It's like
good.
comfort
Well,
food too, but I also like French fries.
oh, there you go. There you go. Well, Kelly,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us here for
Hey,
Diner
thanks,
Table Economics.
Michael.
We appreciate your
Appreciate
time.
it. It was good
And
to
thank
chat
you
with
for
you.
watching Diner Table Economics here at the legendary Airport Diner. And thanks again to our friends at Americans for Prosperity New Hampshire for making this possible. With New Hampshire Journal, I am Michael Graham.